Chapter 20. The hiring of a new personal clerk at the hot house didn't usually get much attention, but when Brittany Monet got the job, convicts and guards took notice. Blonde, single, 24 years old and striking, Monet worked in an office on the second floor of the administration building and only came into the penitentiary area at lunchtime to eat in the officers' cafeteria. No matter, by the end of Monet's first week on the job, convicts had started rearranging their daily routine so they could be near the rotunda when Monet passed through the door on her way to lunch. They wanted to get a glimpse of her. The Bureau has always been dominated by men and has remained so even though Norman Carlson was the first director to really open it up to women and the minorities. Under his leadership, women were hired as guards for the first time. They did all the jobs that male guards performed, including strip searches, but only in lower security prisons. The Bureau claimed its maximum security penitentiaries, such as Leavenworth and Marion, were simply too dangerous for women to work as guards. This didn't mean that there were no women inside the hothouse walls. Of the 40 female employees, 10 actually worked in the main penitentiary or in prison industries, often side by side with inmates. Nearly all, however, were relegated to lower paying secretarial jobs, not to the top paying positions in the custody department. While the Bureau was careful to avoid sexism in its employee manuals, women were expected to adhere to several unwritten rules at the hothouse. Within the penitentiary, it was customary for them either to walk together in groups or to ask a guard to escort them. Most women followed this practice. Monet didn't. A few days after she began work, Monet noticed that a guard was trailing her and another woman as they went to lunch. "Is there something we can do for you, officer?" Monet asked. "No, I'm just escorting you girls to the officer's mess," the guard replied. "I don't need an escort," said Monet. The mess was located at the end of the center hallway, and there were plenty of guards milling about as the women walked there. "Well, I'm going to escort you anyway," the guard said. "It's for your own good, girls." These comments irritated Monet, and later that day, she complained to her supervisor. "Correctional officers shouldn't be bodyguards for the staff," she said. "I can take care of myself." She later added that the last 2 times she had been escorted, the guards had used the opportunity to ask her for a date, and one of them had been married. Monet's superior told the guard who had followed the women to lunch to apologize. Several days later, a different guard spotted Monet in the prison yard, where she had been sent on an errand by her boss. The guard demanded to know what she was doing walking alone in the compound. Monet berated him and continued on her way. Lieutenant Edward Pierce was working in the lieutenant's office when the guard came in and complained about Monet. "That blonde bitch is going to get herself or some officer killed," Pierce snapped. "One of these shitheads is going to drag her into a closet, rape her, and cut her throat. And we're not going to find out about it until we find her body." The 2 other lieutenants in the room agreed, but neither volunteered to say anything to Monet or her supervisor. "Technically, she's right," one said. "An employee can walk wherever he or she wants to, and if we demand that she have an escort, some judge will slap us with a fine, and we'll be accused of being sexist pigs. What she's doing, though, is simply crazy." Monet's attitude upset many of her female co-workers as well. "She is making it dangerous for all of us," She is making it dangerous for all of us, complained Susan Avila McGill, who worked down the hall from Monet. Refusing an escort was only part of the reason for resentment. The close-fitting business suits, dark-hued hose, and high heels that Monet wore would have been acceptable apparel anywhere else, but in the hothouse, most women intentionally dressed down. Some even wore the black blazers, white t-shirts, and gray slacks that men wore. "None of us wants to walk down Center Hall after she goes by because the inmates are so riled up," Avila McGill said. Monet's good looks had also prompted several guards to stop by her desk and ask her for dates. When Monet announced that she had never dated her co-workers, the guards got mad. "That bitch thinks she's too good for us," said one. Soon, Monet was being ostracized by the guards and her female co-workers. A few women felt sorry for her. Phyllis Driscoll later recalled how difficult it was for her to adjust to working in a traditionally all-male environment. When Driscoll's first boss patted her on the buttocks, Driscoll complained to his supervisor, only to be told, "Oh well, those things will happen when you're a pretty girl." But even women who felt strongly about equal rights didn't want guards to stop being their escorts, especially those women who had worked at the hothouse long enough to recall what happened to Peggy Hudson. A stocky woman in her late 30s, Hudson had grown up on a Kansas farm, married her high school sweetheart, and taken work at the prison simply because it paid better than most clerical jobs. In 1983, she was at her desk in the prison hospital when an inmate came in carrying a prescription slip. Hudson's boss and another man were standing less than 10 feet away when the inmate suddenly darted around her desk, pulled a shank from under his shirt, and pressed it against her chest. "I'll kill her," he screamed. "Get out." The two men backed out of the office, and the inmate kicked the door shut and locked it. He pulled the curtains closed, ordered Hudson to sit down in a chair, and tied her hands with a piece of braided cord he had made from his own hair. When guards began pounding on the door, the convict yelled that he would kill Hudson if anyone tried to break in. He demanded that another female employee be brought to the office to speak to him. She was the only person he would talk to, he screamed. The guards sent for the woman. While waiting, the inmate ordered Hudson to stand up, and he whispered in her ear, "Pull down your pants." I told him no, I wasn't going to do that, she recalled later. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you." When Hudson refused again, the inmate grabbed her and jerked her pants down. He took out his knife and forced her onto the floor and climbed on her. Hudson sobbed, but her tears didn't stop him from raping her. A few minutes later, the inmate and Hudson heard voices outside the door. The other employee had arrived, and she and the guards were able to convince the inmate to free Hudson and surrender. The first person Hudson saw was Jerry O'Brien. "We had sex," she whispered. "He raped me." "Oh my God," said O'Brien. "I couldn't cry," she recalled later. "I couldn't cry for 3 days, and then I started sobbing and couldn't stop. My husband and I talked for hours and hours about how we wanted to kill that inmate and how we would make him die slowly." The FBI told her later that the convict had been planning the rape for 3 days. He had attacked her simply because she worked in an office with a door that could be locked. He had never spoken to her before the attack, and Hudson couldn't remember ever noticing him before he came into the office that morning. "I was just convenient." The inmate was sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison, but since he was already serving several life terms, the rape sentence was made to run concurrently. As far as Hudson was concerned, he had gotten off without any punishment at all. "I kept thinking about what he said, how he told me he wasn't going to hurt me," Hudson recalled. "After he raped me, he said, 'See, I didn't hurt you.' And it's true that people don't die from having sex, but being raped scars you inside. He really hurt me and hurt my husband, and he hurt my family. And the thing about it is, he didn't even care." Hudson thought about quitting. She was afraid to go back inside the penitentiary compound, but she decided that she wasn't going to let that rapist end her career. She worked in the administration building for a year before returning to a job inside the penitentiary that required her to be in contact with inmates. "I am glad I am doing something to help keep criminals locked up," she said. "Most of these inmates don't have any conscience. They think they can just do whatever they want and then walk away. If it weren't for the Bureau and the people who work for it, that would be true." Peggy Hudson had watched Brittany Monet and had considered telling her about how dangerous the hothouse was and how quickly someone could be attacked. But Hudson decided not to. It was just as well. Monet said later that knowing about the rape wouldn't have changed her mind about asking guards to escort her. "I'm not naive," she said. "I know this is a dangerous place, but I can also take care of myself. I don't need a babysitter." Norman Bucklew had noticed Monet the first time she came into the officer's cafeteria, where his job was cleaning tables. The 39-year-old convicted murderer was sure he would seduce her. Most women found Bucklew handsome. He had short, curly salt and pepper hair, a mustache, unflinching steel gray eyes, and a muscle man's build. But it was his confident, even arrogant manner that made him noticeable. Bucklew had the air of a Boston Brahmin. He was later asked why he had been so certain he could seduce Monet. He laughed. A young filly, he said, doesn't chase after a weak or crippled horse. She picks the strongest stallion in the pack and runs after him. For her part, when she first met Beklu, Monet had been curious enough to go back to her office and read his prison file. The next day, Buckley was standing outside the cafeteria when Monet came to lunch. "So you're from New York," he said, obviously pleased that he had managed to discover where Monet had grown up. "So you're from New Jersey," she retorted with equal cockiness. From that moment on, they began a game of quiet flirtation. Whenever Monet was too busy to come to the cafeteria, Buckley fixed her a special plate and had one of her co-workers deliver it. On the days that she did make it to the cafeteria, he brought her ice cream for dessert. One afternoon, Monet found rose petals hidden in her napkin. The attraction growing between them did not go unnoticed by guards. Monet would later note that she had not violated any bureau regulations by talking to Buckley, but she acknowledged that she found him appealing. "If anything ever happened at work and I needed someone to protect me, I would depend on him, not the officers," she said. "I think they would have been scared and they wouldn't have protected me from being raped or killed. But I honestly believe he wouldn't have let anyone touch me. No one is going to rape a bride while I'm around," he explained. "I won't permit that to happen. But hey, if there's a riot and all the hacks are being slaughtered, then that would be okay. See, she's a hack. And if all of them is being killed, then it's nothing personal. It's a convict versus hack thing. But raper? No way. I would stop that." 3 months after she began to work at the hot house, Monet was fired. Her termination notice ironically came 9 days after she received her first pay increase and promotion. Warden Matthews' termination letter said she was being fired because numerous staff members have complained to your supervisor regarding your uncooperative and unreceptive attitude towards them. He told the union president that Monet was not cut out for prison work. Monet appealed her dismissal to the federal board that oversees personnel complaints. She pointed out that she had received superior performance ratings and had not been warned or received any counseling about her uncooperative attitude. She also claimed that the real reason she was being fired was because she had refused to have sex with an associate warden at the prison. Just before her complaint was scheduled for a hearing, Monet agreed to drop it in return for an undisclosed cash settlement from the Justice Department. The associate warden named in Monet's complaint later denied her accusation. "The truth is, she never should have been hired here," he said. "She didn't fit in. I think she had a mothering complex. She wanted to be a mother to the convicts. It probably had something to do with her big breasts." Buckley was disappointed when he heard that Monet had been fired. "That broad had heart, and if she had stuck around, we would have eventually gotten together," he said. "I know it, and after I had a little bit of that pussy, I would have gotten her to bring me a gun or a few hacksaw blades. And you know what? That broad had heart, and if she had stuck around, we would have eventually gotten together," he said. I know it, and after a little bit of that pussy, I would have gotten her to bring me a gun or a few hacksaw blades. And you know what? A broad like that would have done it because she would have been in love. And when a broad's in love, it's only natural for them to want to help. I'm going to miss her."